Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. Nice to see you all. It is truly a pleasure. Sherlock Holmes had an assistant. Do you remember what his name was? Watson. Thank you, Elaine. So one time they were laying on a camping trip, and Sherlock turns to Watson, and he says to him, "Watson, wake up." So Watson wakes up, and he's laying on his back, and Sherlock says to him, "Watson, what do you see?" So he says, "I see the stars. Many stars in the sky." "Why? What do you see?" he asks Sherlock. So Sherlock says, "No, you dummy. Somebody stole our tent." In the search for meaning, we're going to delve a little deeper here today as we peel away yet another layer of the onion. I have to tell you, I had a very difficult conversation today with one of our members' relatives' cleaning lady. Okay, one of our members' relatives' cleaning lady, who is a very religious person. She's now very, very sick, unfortunately. And she's become a student of Torah. I'm not sure if she's Jewish or not. I can't tell. But she doesn't sound Jewish. But she's very, very entrenched in her Torah study. And she's decided that the Torah is opposed to medical healing. That's what she decided, that the Torah is opposed to medical healing. You can't go to a doctor, and it's all about belief in God. That's it. Sickness is from God, and healing is from God. So I was called in to run an intervention here by the friends, relatives, right? So I spent a long time with her on the phone, and I came to the conclusion that it was just impossible to talk to her because she was so stuck in the Christian interpretation level where it's just the face value of the verse. The literal reading of the verse is it. That's it. And as many verses that I would try to bring to her, she would bring me another verse, which was a face value, different interpretation. So I quoted the Talmud, I quoted the commentaries, I quoted the other commentaries, the deeper explanations, but she wouldn't go for it because she was stuck at the surface level. As we are students of Torah, we dive deeper, not just in breadth, but in depth, as we take the teachings that we already have and we dig them deeper. It's so sad to try to convince this woman to agree to go to a doctor so that God's blessing can take root. But what can I do? She should be healthy and strong. I'd like to begin by asking you a question. What do you see? What do you see on the screen, folks? I'm going to step out of the way for those on Zoom. Can anybody tell me what you see? What is this?
Tools.
Okay, tools. Olive pita. Oh, with the British accent. Olive pita. It's interesting. Which one is olive pita? One on the right. Okay, all right, fine. Medical tools. What's one on the left? Candle holder. What's a squiggle for? Oh, you hold it from there. Interesting. Very interesting. Yeah. Okay, good. Very interesting. We'll explore this. What? A garlic presser. Which one? That one or that one? On the right, it's a garlic press. Olive pits. Okay, very interesting. Very interesting. Olive pits. All right. Anybody on Zoom got any ideas for us? All right. Okay. So we'll explore this shortly in a few minutes. We'll explore some of these answers a little bit later. But I brought it out to bring a point which we'll explore in a few minutes, okay? As we search for meaning in our lives, we contrast that with what contemporary culture says. Have you ever heard of the expression YOLO? YOLO, YOLO? You only live once. Well, what does that even mean? What does it mean you only live once? Go for it. Give it all you got. Like they say in Israel, maximum. You don't need to speak Hebrew to understand this. In Israel, they say maximum met. You know what maximum means? In the worst case, you die. Like that's the worst. What's the worst that can happen? You know, maximum met. No, you die. So what? So YOLO means you only live once. Give it all you got. Right? They speak about. We use terms like bucket list and kicking the bucket. What does kicking the bucket mean? Yeah, but like, why is it called a bucket? Because it implies that it's all transient. It's all temporary. Nothing has value. It's schlepping around a bucket. No, you kick the bucket. Not so terrible. King Solomon seems to corroborate the same. As King Solomon tells us again in Ecclesiastes, the book that we were introduced to last week, highly recommended reading the 12 chapters of Ecclesiastes. Let's take a look at what King Solomon has to say on page 38, page 38, text 1a, about what King Solomon has to say about the meaning of life, about if life is transient, a bucket, or maybe it's something more. I amassed great wealth. I built homes, planted vineyards. I designed gardens and orchards that filled them with every kind of fruit tree. I made reservoirs to water entire groves of trees. I acquired male and female servants, and I had more cattle, herds, and flocks than anyone else before me in Jerusalem. I picked up silver and gold and the treasures of kings and provinces. I brought in male and female singers and every luxury people could desire, chests and chests of it. I became wealthier than anyone who came before me in Jerusalem, and I still had my wisdom. I didn't hold back from anything my eyes wanted. I didn't deny myself any pleasure. I took joy in everything I achieved, but in the end, that joy was all I really got from it. Then I looked back at all I'd worked for, everything I'd built and gained, and it was all pointless. Just chasing the wind. Nothing lasts under the sun. Ouch. We have here Bill, who's actually studied the book of Kohelet, right? He actually goes through the entire Torah from beginning to end in a book which I highly recommend for you to read. It's called the Torah Anthology. The book has got about 96 volumes. It's going to keep you busy from now until 120 years old. It's good to look forward to something. Highly recommended reading. Many members of our community are reading this book, the Torah Anthology. You could buy one at a time, or you could buy the whole set online, the Torah Anthology. It's a 15th century commentary of the Torah, which incorporates many of the commentaries into one readable text. So he recently studied the book of Ecclesiastes, Kohelet, and this is what it has to say. Where King Solomon says, listen, I've tried it all. He's the wisest of all men, remember. I've tried it all, and everything is a waste of time. Modern psychology calls it the hedonic treadmill, which is essentially the belief that happiness is boosted by material success, is not permanent. We quickly adapt and return to the baseline. In other words, with hedonic adaptation, we get used to any excess. You know, the smell of a new car smells good for a couple days, weeks, and then you get used to it, right? And you go back to your same baseline of happiness. That's the hedonic treadmill. We can never really, truly find happiness. Now, King Solomon didn't only try physical, material pursuits. He also tried spiritual pursuits. Take a look. Text 1b on page 40. I saw that wisdom is better than foolishness, just as light is better than darkness. A wise person sees where they're going, but a fool stumbles in the dark. But I also realized that the same fate awaits them both. So I thought, if I'll end up just like the fool, what's the point of being wise? If we both land up in the grave. And I saw that this too is meaningless, because neither the wise nor the foolish are remembered for long. In time, both are forgotten. And in the end, the wise person dies just like the fool. That made me hate life. Everything happening under the sun seemed so pointless, just chasing the wind. This too, says King Solomon, is futile. Now, King Solomon is not just a nobody. He was a very accomplished person. In his 40-year reign from 863 BCE to 797, how much? Yeah, the math is kind of backwards, but yeah, okay, fair. Oh, no, 40-year reign. That was his life. 40-year reign, yeah. He brought peace to the region. Can you imagine? He brought peace to the region. You heard the news today, the breaking news that America is supposedly building a massive military base in the Gaza area on the border. I mean, that's an interesting development. Wonder what the implications of that are. Can you imagine an American military base on the border of Gaza? Wow. Wow. That's they're starting cheap, right? Good. Wow, that's very, very interesting, right? So Solomon brought peace to the region in his days. His name was Shlomo because it's related to the word shalom, which means peace. He fortified cities. He established trade routes. He built a powerful navy. And he wrote books. He wrote the book of Proverbs, Mishlei. You read that one? He wrote Song of Songs, the romantic. That one's good. Yeah, Song of Songs. And he wrote Ecclesiastes, right? We've spoken about this. Of course. Did the doctor read the medical textbook? I mean, come on. He built the Beis Hamikdash. He built the Holy Temple in Jerusalem. He built the Holy Temple in Jerusalem. That's a major achievement. The first one, he was the 15th generation from Abraham. If you're interested, my daughter and I, for her bas mitzvah in 2019, my daughter Musi and I built a family tree, which goes from my children all the way back to Adam and Eve. It's 131 generations, each generation named parent and child. You can look at it if you want. It's at jewishgardens.com/roots. You can find it on the website, jewishgardens.com/roots, where you can see we actually come from King Solomon. So Abraham was 20 generations from Adam and Eve. I am 110 generations from Abraham. And I am, and King Solomon was 15 generations after Abraham, right? So do the math, right? So there's a big significance to King Solomon being the 15th generation because, like the cycle of the moon waxes for 15 days until it reaches the peak, the full moon, and then it wanes for 15 days until it reaches the new moon, right? Or the no moon. So the 15th generation from Abraham was considered the zenith. Is that the word, the zenith? The zenith. The zenith of Jewish power and strength, just like the moon, which is the most dominant on the 15th of the month. So King Solomon's generation was known as the 15th of the month, the 15th generation, the most powerful one. What constitutes a generation? Well, it's very simple. When you look back in history, so you would go your child, yourself, your parent. If you look backwards in generations, you just go by parent to child. Uh, Yeah, I mean it's not you don't give it a specific it's chronological, it's not units. You don't say 20 years or 25 years. It's just units. It's parent to child. That's the generations. When you go backwards, it's very easy. If you could just trace your generations all the way back if you knew who they were. I was able to link in to the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe is the founder of Chabad, who's the first Chabad Rebbe, and we know that he was the seventh generation from the Maharal of Prague. Remember the Maharal of Prague and the Golem of Prague? So the Maharal of Prague we know comes from King David, and King David we know how he comes from Abraham. So we just managed to bridge the links all the way through from us to the Alter Rebbe, to the Maharal of Prague, to King David, all the way to Adam and Eve, which is there. You can check it out online. So this is the reason, because King Solomon was such an accomplished personality, that's why his words carry even more weight, even more credence than if it was just Joe the plumber or Yassel the plumber who was saying these words, right? And that's why our sages tell us that the name of the author is repeated in the book of Ecclesiastes to double down and say, don't dismiss this text as some depressed drunk who had nothing going on in his life. No, this is Kohelet, King Solomon, the wisest of all men. Take a look, page 42. This is from Nachmanides, 800 years ago. Futility of futilities, said Kohelet. Futility of futilities, all is futile. These are the opening words of Ecclesiastes. If another person had said this, we would have said, they never amassed even 2 coins in their life, yet they speak of the wealth of the world and declare it futility. What do they know? But Solomon, about whom it is written, the king made silver in Jerusalem as abundant as stones. That's how wealthy the people were in Kings 1, is indeed suited to render all as futility of futilities. Behold, Solomon the ruler, the powerful one, the wise, authored this entire book to render the whole world as meaningless and to tell us that everything is utterly futile. That is depressing, right? Now, didn't King Solomon know what we learned last week? Seriously, couldn't King Solomon have come to lesson 1 of the Kabbalah of meaning? The video's up on YouTube. He could have watched it. He could have learned the 4 lessons that we learned from the tree last week. You got to be remained anchored to your roots, right? Growth, productivity, contributions, and relationships. He could have found meaning. What's wrong with King Solomon? Very sad. Very, very disturbing, right? What? I don't know if he's asleep at the wheel. He just sees he driving the wrong direction on the highway, right? Which reminds me of a story. Um, this guy is 95 years old. He hasn't driven the car in 10 years. You know, the kids took away the car keys. So he tells his wife, you know, Rachel, I'm feeling the itch to drive the car again. So I'm gonna take the car for a spin. Don't tell the kids. So she says, okay, just be careful. There's a lot of crazies out there. Gets in the car, turns up, you know, he lowers the windows, he goes on the road, he's having a great time. Suddenly the phone rings. It's his wife. Moshe, Moshe, it's Rachel, be careful. They just said on the radio that there's a Meshugana driving the wrong direction on the highway. He looks out the windows. He says, one Meshugana. It looks like the whole highway is driving in the wrong direction. King Solomon seems to be the guy driving in the wrong direction. You need to get the memo, right? What are you telling us that life is so depressing? It doesn't have to be that depressing. But let's double down. There's another character I'd like to introduce you to. Leo Tolstoy, 19th century Russian novelist, had similar struggles. A man well-read, right? In his 1882 work, have you read his book, A Confession? 1882, right? And after he achieved great fame and success, here's what he writes, what he has to say, page 43. 5 years ago, something very strange began to happen to me. At first, I experienced moments of perplexity and arrest of life, as though I did not know what to do or how to live. And I felt lost and became dejected. But this passed and I went on living as before. Then these moments of perplexity began to occur oftener and oftener. Did you know that was a word? Oftener. If you're a real literary classic like Al here, then you can make up words. Right? Is it a real word? If Tolstoy said it, there's got to be a word, right? Oh, it's the translation. Okay. And always in the same form. They were always expressed by the question, what's it for? What does it lead to? I understood that it was no casual indisposition, but something very important. And if these questions constantly repeated themselves, they would have to be answered. And I tried to answer them. The questions seemed such stupid, simple, childish questions. But as soon as I touched them and I tried to solve them, I at once became convinced, number one, that they are not childish and stupid, but the most important and profound of life's questions. Two, I realized that try as I would, I could not solve them. Before occupying myself with my Samara estate, that's in the south of Russia, I think, southwest Russia, the education of my son or the writing of my book, I had to know why I was doing it. As long as I did not know why, I could do nothing and I could not live. Amidst the thoughts of estate management, which greatly occupied me at the time, the question would suddenly occur to me, well, you have 6,000 desyatinas of land. A desyatina is about 2.75 acres. He had 6,000 desyatinas of land in Samara government with 300 horses. And what next? And I was quite disconcerted. And I did not know what to think. Or when considering my plans for the education of my children, I would say to myself, what for? Or when thinking of the fame my works would bring me, I said to myself, very well, you will be more famous than Gogol or Pushkin or Shakespeare or Molière, or than all the writers of the world. And what of it? And I could find no reply at all. Later, Tolstoy admits to having contemplated suicide, and he only found peace when he found God. As soon as he declared that, quote unquote, God is life, his life was once again infused with meaning. Now, many of us here today have spent much time on the lessons that we've learned last week in lesson 1 of this course. Many of us here have spent tremendous, I know you personally, we've spent time on growth, on productivity. We're highly productive people, on being generous to others, and on building high quality and deep and meaningful relationships. Yet, we're still here in this class. We still showed up to the Kabbalah of meaning, right? Many of us can identify with King Solomon and Tolstoy on some level as we search for ever deeper meaning in our lives. We can still, in fact, be lacking meaning in our lives. What then would be the missing ingredient? So what I'd like to do is to move away from the search for meaning and to move closer to understanding our purpose. Purpose, moving away from meaning and closer to understanding our purpose. And I'd like to illustrate the difference, this very important difference, through the very famous story of Mordechai and Esther, Queen Esther and Mordechai in the Purim story. The story happened 350 BCE, not too long ago, it was just yesterday, 2,375 years ago, when the king of Persia, modern day Iran, his name was Achashverosh, had a crazy party. He got very drunk and he executed his wife Vashti in the opening scene of the story. Took my kids to Disneyland about a year ago. And as we checked in, everybody has a badge with their name on it, right? As we checked in, the lady who was checking us in, her name was Vashti. My kids couldn't get enough of it. We're talking to Vashti. They couldn't believe it. Vashti in person, right? So Vashti was executed. And of course, who was chosen to be the new queen was Esther. Soon after, a couple years later, actually, we see the rise of the wicked Grand Vizier, Haman, who threatens to destroy, to wipe out all the Jewish people. He offers to pay the king 10,000 talents of silver in exchange for the rights to the Jews. And so it was that as that story broke, Mordechai sends a message to Esther. Esther's in the palace. Nobody knew of their connection because remember, Esther kept her faith a secret. She didn't tell anybody her true identity. She actually was married to Mordechai. Isn't that an interesting story? She was married to Mordechai, this Mordechai gave Hatach a copy of the written decree that had been circulated in Shushan, instructing him to show it to Esther and to urge her to go before the king to plead with him and to beg for the lives of her people. Hatach went and delivered Mordechai's message to Esther. Esther then said to Hatach and instructed him to relay her words to Mordechai. Esther was very reluctant. She says, all the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces know that anyone, man or woman, who enters the king's inner court without being summoned is subject to death. You don't just knock on the king's door unless the king extends his golden scepter granting permission to live. And I have not been summoned to the king in 30 days. Now you could ask, Esther was married to Achashverosh, right? What's she worried about? Well, his first wife didn't go very well, right? He executed his first wife. So Esther had good reason to be concerned about her mortality when she was in the presence of her husband, Achashverosh. Esther's message was conveyed to Mordechai. Mordechai sent back this reply to Esther. It's very beautiful. Don't imagine that you, of all the Jews, will escape just because you're in the palace. You're in your ivory tower. Don't convince yourself that you are safe because you're a Jewess in the palace. If you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance will come for the Jews from another source, but you and your father's house will perish. So in this, what is he doing here? He's motivating her. He's giving her motivation. He's telling her this is in your interests because you're not going to save your skin by just staying in the palace. Haman's not going to stop with just the Jews that look Jewish. Hitler went for, 1/4 Jewish, 1/16 a Jewish grandparent. They're going to find you, right? And don't think that somehow you can just remain silent and say, it's not my problem. No. You and your father's house will perish. You're going to just disappear into nothingness if you don't rise to the occasion at this point. But then Mordechai adds a second point. The point which I think about very often in my own personal life and my own challenges that I face in leading the community here. On page 47, text 4b, Mordechai continues and he says a second point. And who knows? Perhaps you became queen for just such a time as this. This time, this place, this person. This is why you were chosen. You think you were chosen for the queen just because you're so beautiful? Out of all the maidens of the land of 127 provinces, Achashverosh chose you just because he likes your hair color, likes your fingernails, your manicure? Come on. this. Who knows? Perhaps this is the reason for which you were chosen. Mordechai now was driving home not just a motivation as in the first point. Now he was driving home a purpose. Here he was saying that you in this space at this time is all part of a far greater divine plan. Don't worry about your personal preference, which is the first point. This is about the master plan. How does Esther respond? Page 47. Esther springs right into action. Page 47, Esther said to reply to Mordechai. Remember, they had to communicate through messengers. They could talk to each other. Nobody was allowed to know that Mordechai, the Jew, had a relationship with Esther, the queen. Go gather all the Jews who are found in Shushan and fast for me. Do not eat and do not drink for 3 days, day and night, and day I too, along with my maidens, will fast likewise. This was the only time in Jewish history when the Jewish community did not observe a Passover Seder. These three-day fast happened over the Passover holiday, and they were not observing the Seder because their lives were in peril. And then I will go to the king, though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish. Such bravery, such courage. Esther is saying over here something so powerful. Why does she say twice, and if I perish, I perish? Because you know that there are 3 cardinal sins that you're not allowed to violate in Torah. What are they? You have to rather get killed rather than violate those sins. You know what they are? Adultery, murder, idolatry. What were you saying first? Is that what you said? Oh, to renounce God. Is that what you said? I didn't hear that. Okay, good. Idolatry, adultery, and murder. You know, the story is breaking now about Ram Bruslavsky, a hostage in Gaza. What they did to him is so gruesome. And they're saying the hostages, it wasn't just the Hamas captors. It was the Gaza civilians that were brutalizing them. He says that they were told, they were taunted. All you need to do in order to get some more food, just convert to Islam. That's it. Just say these words, read this book, and say these whatever, and you'll become Muslim and we'll give you food. He refused. Now, Ram Boslavsky is not a religious Jew. He was just a regular Israeli Jew, wasn't, and it's amazing that he was willing to fight. He was willing to die from starvation and who knows what else in order to maintain his faith. So idolatry, adultery, and murder. Now, the Talmud gets into very interesting discussion. This only applies to men. Only men, but women only have 2 sins for which they need to die for, and that is idolatry and murder. But when it comes to adultery, a woman is passive. That's what the Talmud says. A woman can be passive, and therefore the act is being done to her, not with her. So then the Talmud asks the question, what about Esther? See, Esther, now what she was doing, what she was telling Mordechai, by going to the king, this is the part they didn't tell you in Hebrew school. When she went to the king, it wasn't just to have a chat with him. She was going to seduce him, which means she wasn't just being passive when it comes to adultery. Remember, she was a married woman. She was married to Mordechai. So now all the time that she was with Achashverosh, she was just passive, no problem. But when now she's going to Achashverosh on her own account, she's initiating, this is adultery when she should be killed. So what she says to her husband, Mordechai, and just as I will perish, which means as I will lose you, my husband, in this world, because an adulterous woman is no longer allowed to be with her husband. If she's with a paramour, she's never again allowed to be with her husband. Right? As I lose you in this world, I will also lose my portion in the world to come because I'm willingly committing adultery. This is the sacrifice of Esther, who says, for my people, I'm losing my portion in this world, and I'm losing my portion in heaven as well. This is her sacrifice. This is her commitment. Just reflect on that a moment. Would you be willing to do that for your fellow Jews? Just think about that, right? Would you be willing to give up everything you have, your life? I mean, this is what our soldiers did, right? This is what our soldiers did when they go out to battle. 922 soldiers that died so we can have our freedoms. We're talking about the IDF, right? But imagine what it means to give up your life in this world and in the next world, because she's committing spiritual suicide as well. This is Esther. This is Esther's response. And what is her response? She's focused on her mission. The moment Mordechai tells her the second point, which is not just about why this might be meaningful, but actually why it's purposeful, now she springs into action because what Mordechai has done to Esther is that in the first point, he says to her, it's subjective, it will be beneficial to you too, because by the way, you're going to die as well if you don't take action, so you might as well. So there's a personal meaning here. But when it comes to the second point, he says, listen, it's not even subjective, it's objective. This is why you're here. This is your why. Mordechai helped Esther find her why. And we put a little infographic here on page 48 just to take a look at on the difference between meaning and purpose. See, when it comes to meaning on the top line, when it comes to meaning on the top line and the bottom line is purpose. So in the top row, the person comes first. There's me. It's all about me. It's subjective. I happen to exist. Let me live a meaningful life. And the question is, can I attribute meaning to my life? But when it comes to purpose, it's the other way around. The person is secondary. It's about the mission. Something is needed, and I am introduced to fill that need, and therefore the purpose is inherent. It's not arbitrary. There is an objective purpose to life, regardless of whether I like it or not. Now that we understand the difference between searching for meaning and searching for purpose, let's return back to our two unfamiliar objects. You ready? So what are they? I'm very impressed, by the way. That's two people here said an olive pita. That's close enough. You said cherry pita? I did not hear that. I did not hear that. Well said. Look, olive, I think is close enough. I think you could probably use a cherry pita for an olive pita. Right? You probably work. I've never had a reason to do this in my life. It's a cherry, I know, but I imagine if you put an olive in there, it would probably work as well. Right? You probably could, right? Okay, good. So now what's the other one? It's an AI created image. We asked AI to create something which is utterly useless. Now, very interesting, Al, that you came up with a candle holder. I mean, that's kind of interesting. Maybe, maybe. But what you're trying to do now is you're trying to infuse meaning onto something which already exists, right? As opposed to the cherry putter. See, the minute we said cherry putter or olive putter, like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. You said so they have the thing over there and the thing at the bottom. It kind of makes sense. You get the squeezer, right? But when we try to superimpose a purpose onto something which has no purpose, we can have many different opinions. Maybe somebody will say that it's a thing for rings. When you wash for hamotzi and the women want to have a place to hang their rings. They won't, I could say that. I could argue with you about that, right? We can have, but then why is it like that? Yeah, I guess we could come around. Why does it have a little stool? We don't know, right? So we could infuse meaning into something which doesn't really have a meaning because meaning is objective. But when something has a purpose, it's clear as day. It's objective. It's not subject to our personal opinions. It's very, very clear. The former has a purpose, the cherry pitter. The other one, we just need to find it. We don't know. We're gonna kind of guess. So the latter, the AI image is nothing, and we're constantly seeking to reinvent it. This is the role of faith in our lives. Faith infuses our lives with purpose, even if not meaning. Let's take a look in the words of Jonathan Sacks, former chief rabbi of the United Kingdom. He says it so beautifully, page 49, text number 5. Says Rabbi Sacks, think about it. Every function that was once performed by religion can now be done by something else. In other words, if you want to explain the world, you don't need Genesis, you have science. If you want to control the world, you don't need prayer, you have technology. If you want to prosper, you don't necessarily seek God's blessing, you have the global economy. You want to control power, you no longer need prophets, you can have liberal democracy and elections. If you're ill, you don't need a priest, you can go to a doctor. If you're guilty, you don't have to confess, you can go to a psychotherapist instead. Nice. If you're depressed, you don't need faith, you can just take a pill. And if you need salvation, you can go to today's cathedrals, the shopping centers of Britain. And as one American writer calls them, weapons of mass consumption. Religion seems superfluous, redundant, de trop, which means too much. Why then does it survive? Questioned by the chief rabbi. And here he answers, my answer is simple. Religion survives because it answers three questions that every reflective person must ask. Who am I? Why am I here? And how then shall I live? You see, like the instrument on the right, the world was created with a purpose. But what is that purpose? It's the Torah that helps us find it. That's the purpose. Like I revealed to you, the purpose was the cherry pitter, the olive pitter. The Torah is what reveals to us the purpose of our lives. Let's take a look at what Rabbi Cook has to say about this on page 50. Before I was created, during all the limitless time that came before, there was nothing in the world that required me. Had I been needed for any purpose or task, I would have existed earlier. The fact that I wasn't created until that specific moment is proof that there was no need for me until then. My existence was not necessary until it was. And when the time came, I was brought into the world to fulfill a role, to contribute something essential to the perfection of existence. You know, the Rebbe teaches us, nice, eh? The Rebbe teaches us that a person's birthday, along these same lines, your birthday is a very big event. Your birthday is the day that God decided that the world can't continue without you. And that's a big deal. But you ask yourself, really? Me? The same God who decided that we need a Grand Canyon and a Mount Kilimanjaro and all sorts of uncountable species and extraordinary systems in this world feels that I am necessary? God needs me? Wow, what for? And that is where we find our purpose. That's where Torah comes in, as we'll talk about it momentarily. It's not about what I find meaningful, but rather it's about what is my purpose. It's not a subjective choice. It's an objective mission. Now, this is true not only of people, but of all of existence. Think about a piece of art, a Picasso. If you were to buy a Picasso and then choose to use it as a cutting board in your kitchen to make salad, I mean, it has meaning if you're using it as a cutting board, because to me, it's now serving as a cutting board, right? It's subjective. But it doesn't really have any purpose, because that's not what the Picasso was made to do. It wasn't made to cut salads, right? With art, it's quite obvious the difference between meaning and purpose. It's quite obvious the purpose of the art is to be displayed and to be admired and cherished and renowned and so on and so forth. But when it comes to other items in this world, it's not so obvious, like money. What's the purpose of money? That becomes a lot more gray area, as we are not quite sure what the purpose of our money is. This purpose infuses us the sense of purpose that the Torah tells us of why we're here, infuses us with a sense of self-esteem, giving us inherent value as opposed to just subjective meaning. I'd like to share with you a story of a chassid of the Alter Rebbe, a disciple of the Alter Rebbe, the founder of Chabad. This man was a very wealthy businessman who lost his fortune, suddenly lost his fortune, and came to complain to the Rebbe. It's a beautiful story, very, very foundational. Let's take a look at page 52. We'll read the story here in the original, the way it was written down by the sixth Rebbe of Chabad, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson, in a letter. Page 52, text number 7. So he traveled to the Rebbe, Rabbi Schneer Zalman of Liadi. This would be my grandfather, 9 generations ago. And he poured out his heart with many tears and deep anguish. If God has seen fit to afflict me with poverty, I accept the judgment, he said. But how can I, God forbid, remain in debt and fail to repay? How can I not fulfill my promises that I made to my family and relatives and my daughter's weddings? And I made those promises back when I was wealthy. According to our holy Torah, I had every right to make those commitments. If I now fail to keep them, I will be making a desecration of God's name. The man cried bitterly over the great punishment that he was being made to endure. With great emotion, he begged the Rebbe to arouse abundant mercy on his behalf from the source of true compassion and kindness, that he might repay his debts and fulfill his promises. After that, he said, I'll accept whatever poverty heaven has decreed upon me. He ended his words, Rebbe, I need to repay all my debts. I need to give my relatives and my family members what I promised them. I need to provide for the weddings of my two daughters as I promised them. The Rebbe was leaning on his holy arms in deep spiritual absorption, listening to the man's cries and pleas. After some time, the Rebbe lifted his holy head and, still absorbed in that intense spiritual state, he said, quote, you speak of what you need, but you say nothing about why you are needed. You speak about what you need, but you ask not what you are needed for. You ask what America can do for you, but you don't ask what you can do for America. What God needs to do for you, you know. But what you need to do for God, you make no mention. The man fell into a faint. This is the end of the story. He fainted. When he came to, he devoted himself to the study of Torah and to the observance of mitzvahs there in wherever he was in Liadi, in the Rebbe's court, in the city of Liadi, the village. And he totally let go of his anxieties. He forgot about them. He divested. Days later, when it was time for him to go back home, he came into the Rebbe for a blessing. The Rebbe blessed him with success. He went home. He soon became wealthy, and he paid off all of his debts. That was the end of the story. When we analyze the story, we see a man who was living a life that was filled with meaning, subjective meaning, and now he had lost that meaning. He had a lot of meaning, but not necessarily any purpose. He had the money that he needed. He was able to wheel and deal, to borrow and repay. He could do whatever he needed to do, but he totally lost track of his purpose. And maybe the whole reason why he lost his money was in order to bring him to this awareness, to this realization that he had become so self-absorbed in the subjectivity of his meaning that he had lost sight of the objectivity of the purpose for which he was needed for. The Rebbe challenged him to ask, not what I need, but what I am needed for. To focus less on meaning and more on purpose, because purpose has actually got nothing to do with circumstance. How often do we hear people say, I'll be happy if this happens. I'll be happy when that relationship proceeds. I'll be happy when I get accepted to college, when I graduate from college, when I get a job, when I start making money, when the kids move in, when the kids move out, when, never comes, right? Purpose, right? Purpose has nothing to do with circumstance. It's always there. If God put me here in this circumstance, in this situation, then this is my purpose. And this is what transformed the man, and the blessings soon followed. The Russian Gulag was a terrible place. It was the frozen wastelands of this Arctic Circle. When the Russians wanted to exile someone, to punish someone, they would send them to the Gulag. There were no fences around the Gulag. There was no way to escape. There was no way. There's no way out, because it was surrounded by thousands of miles of barren wasteland of what?
Tundra.
Of tundra. Exactly. It's just the Arctic. Reb Mendel Futerfas was a chassid who was sent to the Gulag for his crimes of teaching Torah during communist times. He actually made it back to America, to London, to Israel. He was a teacher of my brother. He passed away probably in sometime in the 90s. Reb Mendel Futerfas was there in the Gulag together with other dissidents such as businessmen, entrepreneurs, thinkers, writers, authors, people that didn't toe the line of the communist manifesto. These people were right. They had no fences. They were just friends, and they had to work in the gulag to pay their keep. They would often remark how they were all miserable, and only one amongst them, only Reb Mendel Futerfas, was always happy. They were Gentiles, they were Jewish, but they would remark, "How is this guy always happy, whereas we are all miserable?" And his answer was amazing. He said, "Why are you guys miserable? Because you used to be a professor in St. Petersburg. You used to be a doctor in Moscow. You used to be an entrepreneur in Rostov. And now you're in the gulag. So you can't be a doctor without without your patients. You can't be a professor without your students. You can't be an entrepreneur without your bank accounts. Of course you're miserable. But me, what I do, I serve God. Whether I'm in Moscow, St. Petersburg, Rostov, or in the gulag, I serve God. If God put me here, it means today he wants me to serve God here. Tomorrow he puts me over there. He wants me to serve God over there. Wherever I am, I'm happy because I'm connected to my purpose. Whereas those people were searching for their meaning and they were miserable when they didn't have what they deemed necessary for their meaning. Reb Mendel was engaged not in meaning, he was engaged in purpose. Yes, like Joseph, good example. And that's why, like Joseph, always stay cheerful. Can you imagine Joseph? He gets sold as a slave, his brothers try to kill him. He becomes a slave in Egypt, and he's cheerful. And he bumps in the dungeon in Egypt. For 10 years he's in the dungeon. He bumps into the very people that threw him into the dungeon. They're also thrown in the dungeon. How would you react if the people that put you in the dungeon for 10 years now are also in the dungeon? There's a word for this in English. It's called schadenfreude. You know what that means? It's taking pleasure in somebody else's misery. So you would think that Joseph would react that way. Oh no. Joseph sees him and he says, "Why do you guys look so sad? Why do you look down? What do you mean, why do we look down? We're the king's ministers and we're in the dungeon. That's why we look down." But Joseph, he didn't understand that. For Joseph, life was not about the search for meaning. It was fully focused on purpose. If I'm here, I'm serving God right here, right now. And I'm fully invested. I'm not waiting for something to happen to find my meaning. I'm experiencing my purpose wherever I am at every single moment. Mark Twain said that the two most important days in a person's life are the day he's born, the day he's born, and the day he finds out why. These are the two most important days in a person's life. So how do we find our why? Wouldn't it be nice if we come with an instruction manual? If every child came with a little instructions, you know? That'd be amazing, right? The answer is that it's got to actually come from outside the system. You can't find your purpose. You can't find your why from within the system. Let me illustrate again from Rabbi Jonathan Sachs on page 55. Take a football game, soccer. Some hypothetical visitor from a land to which football has not yet penetrated, an alien, right, wants to understand the strange ritual which excites so much passion. You explain the rules of the game, what constitutes as a foul, what's a goal, and so on. Fine, says the visitor. I now understand the game. What I don't understand is why you get so excited about it. Here you might have to launch into some larger reflections about games as ritualized conflict and the role of play in rehearsing skills needed in actual conflict. You might even suggest that ritualized conflict reduces the need for actual conflict, the football pitch, as a substitute for the battlefield. You know, I once drove from Leeds, England, to Manchester. Drove a car, I borrowed a car from a friend, and I drove the car from Leeds to Manchester. I arrived in Manchester, and the kind of death stares that I was receiving, I said, I've never been to such an anti-Semitic place in my life. Through the window of this little car, you know, in Europe, they have these tiny little cars. There's a little car, I got my yarmulke, you know, I look Jewish, little beard I had then at that time. I'm driving the car, and they're staring me down like the devil. Said, I've never been to such an anti-Semitic place. Actually, I'm from South Africa, and I think in England they drive the same side of the road as South Africa. It's also the left side, right? In Europe and South Africa and Australia, the right is left, right? No, the left is right and the right is wrong. Whatever. Okay. So until I realized the death stares I was getting is because the car I was driving had a Leeds United sticker in the back window. Oh my God! I thought I'm surrounded by anti-Semites. They just hate my sticker in the back window. Okay, fine. You know, but can you imagine, you know, what sport has done to societies that needed to fight, it gave them an opportunity to take out their ire and wrath at each other, their rage, by manifesting it over the football pitch instead of pitchforks and axes as they were wont to do in the dark ages when they would attack the Jews because they were in a bad mood, right? There is an internal logic of the system, the rules of football, but the meaning of the system lies elsewhere, and it can only be understood through some sense of the wider human context. And it can only be understood through some sense of the wider human context in which it is set. To do this, you have to step outside the system and see why it was brought into being. There's no way of understanding the meaning of football by merely knowing its rules. They tell you how to play the game, but not why people do so and why they invest in it, the passions they do. The internal workings of a system do not explain the place the system holds in human lives. The meaning of the system lies outside the system. Therefore, the meaning of the universe lies outside the universe. Only something or someone outside the universe can give meaning to the universe. We can only find purpose in this life from beyond this life, and that is something which we can only find from the one thing which is not part of this world. Can you think of what that might be? God. Exactly. God is the one thing that's not in the system. God is outside of the system. Let me illustrate with a brief video presentation here. Yeah, so take a look at what it says in text number 9. The Torah, this is from the Medrash. The Torah's existence precedes the world by 2,000 years. 2,000 years. The Torah preceded the world by 2,000 years. Now that's a little ridiculous because there was no time before the world was created. Time itself is a creation that happened at the beginning of creation. So what it means when it says, thank you, when it means that it says that the world was preceded by the Torah preceded the world by 2,000 years, it means that the Torah is like two levels. Thank you. I guess it works. Thank you. Is that the Torah is 2 dimensions removed beyond the world. That's what it means to say. And that's why when we are looking for our purpose, we can't find it from inside the system. The only place we're going to find that purpose, thank you, is from outside the system. Let me illustrate with a brief video.
Hey, cow, what's the meaning of life?
Here, have some.
Thanks. I'll pass. Parrot, what's the meaning of life?
What's the meaning of life? Oh,
Yeah, that's not helping. Lion, what's the meaning of life?
Life has meaning.
Noted. Moving along. What's that circle?
Take a guess.
A sun? That's it?
Wrong.
Maybe a person?
Nope.
I know, a balloon.
Nice, but no.
If it's not a sun, a head, or a balloon, maybe it doesn't mean anything.
It does, but it's in my mind. I made it for a purpose. You just have to ask me.
Okay, I give up. What is it?
A cake.
A cake?
You kept guessing the circle's meaning. Your answers were clever, but not what I intended. Life is the same. To know the truth, you must ask the one who made it.
And that is the role of Torah. That the Torah, which is beyond existence, is what gives us the tools that we need to be able to find the purpose for which we were created. If we don't know our why, we can never truly find peace because we're busy using our olive pitter or our cherry pitter to hang our rings or to punch holes in our files, but we're really not using it for what it was intended. If we're not living our lives for the purpose for which they were intended, then we'll be chasing our tail in the rat race, struggling with what Tolstoy was struggling. At some point, our efforts to make life meaningful tend to crash. Without anchors and by prioritizing pleasure, we tend to fall apart eventually. Rabbi Akiva gives us a beautiful, beautiful metaphor. Rabbi Akiva lived at the time of the Romans, 2,000 years ago. The Romans were crushing the Jewish community, trying to destroy. They were trying to do to the Jews what they had done to every other civilization that they conquered. Anybody who was conquered by the Romans vanished, were just subsumed into the Roman Hellenic culture, except for the Jews. The Jewish people were the only nation that actually outlived the Romans, even though the Romans conquered us. Right? What happened was that they try to wipe out our sages. They try to outlaw the study of Torah. They try to kill our sages. Rabbi Akiva was a sage at that time. He was violating the ban by teaching Torah in public. So take a look at what happened, page 59. This is from the Talmud, text number 10. Once the wicked Roman government issued a decree forbidding Jews from studying Torah. Papus ben Yehuda came upon Rabbi Akiva, who was publicly gathering groups and teaching Torah. He said to him, Akiva, aren't you afraid of the authorities? Rabbi Akiva replied, let me tell you a parable. A fox was walking along a river and saw fish darting back and forth. He said to them, fish, why are you fleeing? They answered to the fox, we're fleeing from the nets that the people have cast for us. Said the fox, why don't you come up on dry land, live with me, just as your ancestors lived with mine? In other words, why do you have to worry about the anxieties of the nets? Come live with me, I'll keep you safe. The fish said to him, are you the one that they call the cleverest of the animals? You're not clever, you're a fool. If we're in danger, even here in the place that gives us life in the water, how much more so if we leave the place of our water where we can't survive? Here we might die, there by you, for sure we're going to die. The same is true for us, said Rabbi Akiva as he concluded the metaphor. We are the Jews, and like a fish in water, Torah to the Jew is like water to the fish. If we're at risk even while studying Torah, the source of our life, as it says, for it is your life and the length of your days, how much worse would it be if we abandoned it, if we abandoned the Torah? What Rabbi Akiva was answering Papus ben Yehuda, who asked a good question. Why are you doing this? What he answered him was that whilst what your question might make sense, but from a meaning point of view, from a point of view of meaning, my life, might be in danger by what I'm doing. But Rabbi Akiva was not looking through a point of view of meaning. He was looking through a point of view of purpose, because he realized that only through Torah are we able to find our purpose. Without Torah, I'll live a life without purpose. And what would be the point of it all? Like the fish without the water, I need to have my purpose. Without that, it's not even worth living. Like the Israeli prime minister who was asked about shutting down a concert during a time of war. I was in Israel last week. It's amazing. The place is booming. You wouldn't think that there's war. Sandy just came back. Joel's about to go. You wouldn't realize that there's actually a war going on like 10, 20, 30 miles down the road. There's construction. The stores are bustling. Life is booming. It's amazing. So there was talk. This is back in the 60s, the 70s. There was talk about shutting down a concert during a wartime. And the prime minister said, if we shut down the concert, then what are we fighting for? Think about that, right? What are we fighting for? For our freedom so we can live in misery? No. We're here to live. We're here to actually live. And if we can't celebrate our culture, if we can't dance and sing and celebrate and live our lives, then what are we fighting for?
Naast natuurlijk is zo dat ik al voor school, dat is wel,
You draw similarity. When we go back to Tolstoy, Leo Tolstoy, the 19th century Russian author, the futility that he grappled with is because he was invested in the pursuit of meaning, of subjective meaning, without worrying about his purpose, and that's what left him depleted. It was only later when he was able to discover his purpose, as he finally realized that God is life, that's when he found his joy. King Solomon as well, his conclusion, whilst Dean correctly points out that Kohelet, Ecclesiastes, seems to be very depressing, but you got to read all the way through to the very end because he captures it all in the final verse. I want you to see that. The final verse of Ecclesiastes on page 60. How does he end it all up? Page 60, text number 11. The end of the matter after everything is considered. Revere God and keep his commandments because that's what it means to be human. What King Solomon is telling us is that it's all about purpose. We are on a mission. Don't get stuck in what makes you feel good in your meaning. Find your why, find your purpose, and that is what it's all about. In other words, as long as you're focused on yourself, as long as you focus on what makes me feel good, you're going to be in a cycle of violence. It's never going to work. But the minute that you can break yourself free from that selfish, vicious cycle and allow yourself to focus on not what you need, but what you're needed for, not what you need from God, but what God needs from you. When you find that purpose, that's when you find your value, your self-esteem, your objectivity. And that is when King Solomon says, this is the point of it all. Because we can only find purpose outside of the system, beyond the system, in the Torah, because the Torah is the blueprint of life. Suddenly, when you make the switch, our circumstances are no longer the problem. Because we're not bothered about what makes me happy or makes me miserable. We've moved away from meaning towards purpose. And if I'm in this situation, then this is where God needs me right now. This is how God needs me right now. This is the place that God needs me to shine my light. Okay. So now we know we need to seek purpose. Fine. But how do I find my unique purpose? That is the content of next week's class. Let me just finish up with it's definitely a cliffhanger. So let me just finish with a quick summary video.
Lesson 2. To make or not to make meaning. 1. The question about searching for the meaning of our lives is a distraction. Meaning is subjective. It refers to anything I deem to be enriching, inspiring, and beneficial. There's a more important question we need to answer. What is our purpose? Purpose is objective and focuses on what I am needed for at any given moment, irrespective of personal feelings, preferences, and benefits. 2. God created us intentionally, so our lives are inherently purposeful. There is a mission that precedes our coming into the world, and Judaism wants us to ask, what is my purpose, rather than just, what do I find meaningful? 3. Purpose isn't dependent on circumstances, because if God put us in a certain situation, there is certainly purpose in it for us. 4. Purpose can't be discovered from inside the system. It must come from outside the system. Only from beyond existence can we find the purpose for which the entire system was established. The Torah, conceptually, precedes the world. It is not part of creation. It is from beyond the system. 5. A society that prioritizes pleasure and freedom, even if pursued through meaningful channels, cannot hold together. With no higher calling and no objective reason for being here, we float freely, and meaning disappears. For us Jews, Torah is the only space where our soul can imbibe life-sustaining purpose.
So I'd like to leave you with this thought. of what is your why. I just want to say, what is your why? You know, the author Simon Sinek, he's a consultant, thinker, entrepreneur. He says that the difference between companies like Microsoft and Apple is that Microsoft is all about making money. So they're trying to do. They're trying to make money. They're trying to sell you a product that you want. But Apple is not interested in that. Apple is interested in changing the world. And that's why Apple has this cult-like following, because we are so attracted to that kind of depth. You don't find the cult followings of Microsoft, I don't think. You don't find people getting excited about Windows or those kind of things. But when it comes to Apple, I'm going to pay more money. It doesn't matter to me because this is a culture that I connect with on a very deep level. The world stops to watch a man who knows where he's going. How many of us are just living our lives, but when you once in a while encounter a person, a man or a woman, who lives with presence, lives with purpose, lives with intention, they're not there to complain about the election, they're not complaining about the war, about the economy, about the HOA, about the neighbors. They're just fully present in every experience and every encounter. They are character. They are attractive. They're exciting to be around. They're inspirational. And we too can reach that space when we become conscious of this truth. When we become conscious and aware that we too need to find our purpose. Like Mordechai tells Esther, don't focus on yourself. Focus on what you're needed for. Maybe this is the whole reason why you landed up in the palace. It was all by divine design. You think you came to Palm Beach Gardens by mistake? There's a lady here from Jensen Beach. How did you land up over here? Was it by mistake? Who knows? Maybe it's the flyer show in the mailbox. Okay. Well, why did it show up in your mailbox? How did that even happen? It's meant to be. Like Esther, it's all meant to be. The people we encounter, the problems that we become aware of, all of these are there for our purpose. So let's not kvetch, let's not complain, but let's try to think about our why. Let's search within the Torah to try to understand our collective why. And it's next week that we'll talk about our individual and specific whys. Yes, in the back. If I decide to never read the Torah, am I doomed to never know my purpose? Well, I hate to sound dogmatic, right? But I think there's a lot to be said about, like we saw in the video, of the artist, right? If you say, let's rephrase the question. If I refuse to ever converse with the artist, am I never going to know the meaning of the circle? What is the answer? Probably not. Why would you want to make that limitation upon yourself? Now, again, I don't want to sound dogmatic or like a religious fanatic and say you have to do this, but our approach is more of a pull rather than a push. We're not trying to guilt you into studying Torah, but rather excite you into studying Torah. The Torah needs to be interpreted on a personal, profoundly meaningful, personal level, right? If the Torah is not talking to you individually, then you're not learning it right. You need a rabbi, a teacher, a rebbitzin, someone that can guide you, that can hold your hand and walk you through. I went to the Smithsonian with my wife, and I have to tell you, it was not a pleasant experience. I had no idea what I was doing. We were looking at pictures on the wall, and it just wasn't talking to me, and we were going around and around and around and around, and it was getting tiring. But if I had a guide that was walking me and showing me, this one was painted under fire, and this one was painted where after his wife died, and this one when his child was sick, it would become much more meaningful, much more personal, much more relatable. And I think that's how we have to study the Torah. If the Torah doesn't excite you, if it's not lighting up your soul, you need a new teacher. Yeah.
I don't find myself religious person, but I find I'm attracted to come in here because I get so much knowledge there's your class from different things, and I gained so much that I keep coming back, even though I'm not.
So here's a guy, it doesn't feel like he's learning Torah, but he's refueling his soul all the time because he's just filling up for gas. It's amazing, right? Phyllis. You're saying there's a lot of people today that are giving other people purpose, which is actually dangerous. Your purpose is to protest against genocide, right? Right. They're giving them meaning, they're not giving them purpose. That's what they're doing. It's meaning without purpose. But now that we understand the difference, we can become conscious to identify the difference between those two. So thank you very much, everybody, for joining me here tonight. I'd love to take your questions and comments. Always send me an email, rabbi@jewishgardens.com. And listen, still one last question. Oh, what does it mean the Torah was given 2,000 years? So it doesn't mean physical years because there wasn't time before creation. It means like, I would say 2,000 like dimensions prior. Doesn't mean minutes and seconds and hours. It means like mindsets. The Torah is just way beyond the world. That's what it means. Now there is more nuance to that. To the 2 and to the 2,000, there's Kabbalistic, spiritual, mystical nuance to that. But suffice it to say that it's 2 degrees removed. How's that? 2 degrees removed from the world the way that we know it. It's outside of the system. Not just one level, but 2 levels, right? So like one level would be clothing is surrounding my body, but then there's the house which surrounds my clothing. So there's 2 degrees of transcendence, of separation.